All right there, everyone. A recent poll indicates that media distrust is at an all-time high, with 72% saying that the media is dividing Americans and spreading hate. That is what we'll be talking about on today's video. Before we do, I wanted to announce the grand opening of our brand new online store that has all kinds of gear and apparel celebrating all things nationalist, populist, and traditional. So click on the link below and have a look at our t-shirts, our hoodies, our coffee mugs, and more, all featuring some of the key nationalist heroes from around the world. So let us know what you think of the store, and also if you'd like to see items for sale that aren't already there, we'll be more than happy to make this your very own clearinghouse for all things nationalist, populist, and traditionalist. So enjoy. All right, the Washington Examiner published their findings today based on a recent Zogby Analytics poll that found that nearly 3/4 of the nation believes that the media is in fact dividing Americans along political, racial, and gender lines, which they believe is fomenting hate and misunderstanding between these artificially constructed groups. It's really one of the most stunning repudiations and condemnations of the press in recent surveys. But as we'll explore in a moment, it really is, in fact, becoming par for the course in terms of how Americans are perceiving the corporatist globalist media. What's also interesting here from this poll is that while Republicans were nearly unanimous in their condemnation of the media, which is, of course, to be expected, but what's really interesting here is that the study found that a slight majority of Democrats also believe that the media was divisive and guilty of spreading hate and misunderstanding. 51% of Democrats believe that to be true, a slight majority, which is itself highly significant. In terms of racial demographics, 76% of whites agreed that the media was divisive, 64% of Hispanics, and 54% of blacks. Again, clear majority of voters in each racial demographic have largely lost trust in the media. Now, like I said, this is just becoming par for the course with regard to American attitudes towards the so-called mainstream media, the corporatist, globalist media. Virtually every major poll and study over the last 20 years indicates that the media's level of trustworthiness has been declining rapidly over that time period. Perhaps the single most devastating poll of late was the one conducted by the Media Insight Project in partnership with the Associated Press. They found that only 6% of Americans have a lot of confidence in the media. 6%. We're talking here about nearly 95% of the poll population being skeptical, at least to some degree, towards the corporatist globalist media. And as to another point, I think that this pervasive distrust in the media explains the stubborn level of approval for President Trump, despite 24/7 negative coverage. On average, 90% of the coverage of the corporatist globalist media was found to be negative against President Trump. Despite 24/7 negative news coverage, his approval ratings consistently range between 45 and 50%. Now, while we have no hard evidence, I think it's rather reasonable to conclude that the 24/7 negative news coverage has had little effect on Trump's approval, precisely because such negativity is increasingly being interpreted as itself divisive and hateful. Perhaps you remember when the avowed, always, now and forever, never Trumper Glenn Beck put on a MAGA hat for all to see, right? He actually donned a red Make America Great Again hat on his show. And he said to the media, "You guys did this. You pushed me here. Your incessant dishonesty, your outright lying about Donald Trump and what he's doing and trying to do. I mean, that's it. I've had it. I'm not going to stand around and continue to just let you guys pummel this man." I mean, that says a ton, a massive ton. This guy, Glenn Beck, was perhaps the single most rabid anti-Trump public personality out there. He was right up there with Jennifer Rubin in terms of being rabidly anti-Trump. Well, now he says he's going to vote for Trump in 2020. I heard it with my own ears. He's going to vote for Trump in 2020 in order to vote against the lying and dishonest and liberal and corporatist and globalist media. So that would be at least some anecdotal evidence that the media's increasingly perceived dishonesty is at least not hurting Trump's approval ratings, and indeed may even be helping him. Now, the Zogby poll that shows that 72% of Americans consider the media divisive and harmful is devastating news if you're part of the corporatist globalist media conglomerate, because it's actually thwarting the media's deliberate attempt to destroy Trump. If you remember back in October of 2016 during the presidential campaign, the journalist Barry Castleman made the argument that the mainstream media had so combined their forces against Donald Trump and in favor of Hillary Clinton that he believed we were witnessing nothing less than what he called an attempted media coup d'etat that sought to determine the outcome for the next president of the United States before voting had even taken place. He saw, and I think he was quite right here, he saw nothing short of a mob mentality among the newspapers, magazines, the major cable TV and radio networks, all ganging up against Trump to deliberately influence the outcome of the 2016 election. And of course, since becoming president, we've seen nothing less than a full-out assault on Trump with 24/7 negative coverage. But that's just where it all begins. In many respects, the secular corporatist globalist media is actively attempting to overthrow the Trump presidency by orchestrating an inside-the-beltway mutiny, a mass coup d'etat by the globalist establishment represented in both parties. And so the media are actively signaling that if you come out against Trump, either as a Republican or as a Democrat, but especially if you're a Republican, they will be totally behind you. They will champion you for no other reason than to bring Trump down. This is why the now defunct senator from Arizona, Jeff Flake, gets such glowing coverage on all the network and cable news channels. He's the best friend of all the corporatist media elite. He's their best friend, as was John McCain, by the way. He was their best friend because he only opens his mouth to criticize President Trump, as a Republican of all things. This is what's really going on here. The media is signaling to the powers that be that if you come out of the woodwork and attempt to take Trump down, man, we will light the stage. We'll be your adoring fans. We'll make you king of the world. However, briefly, right? If you're a Republican, they'll spit you out in the moment they're done with you. But hey, man, maybe those 15 minutes are worth it. But I think, too, that the combination of the media's obsession over the Russian collusion myth on the one hand, and their bizarre approval of the Brett Kavanaugh chaos on the other, that really combined to just really crush whatever remaining credibility they had with the majority of Americans. Keep in mind, the liberals in the corporatist globalist media, which I know is redundant to say, but they were putting all their hopes in the Mueller probe, just waiting for the indictments to just shower down on President Trump. And when all he had were these indictments against the 12 Russians, which of course was a joke. I mean, you didn't need a special counsel for that. You just needed a basic federal investigation. And no one takes seriously that these 12 Russians will ever be extradited to the United States to stand trial, right? Notice how the whole thing just about the indictments has just been forgotten about, just poofed into air. When the media saw that nothing was coming from this Mueller probe and that Trump was about to appoint the 5th conservative to the 9-seat Supreme Court, they freaked out. And have taken upon themselves, frankly, they took it upon themselves to try to remove our president. Remember the reactions after Trump's meeting with Putin? I mean, you had the former CIA director, John Brennan, who's become a regular guest on the ultra-liberal MSNBC. He came out and accused the president of freaking treason. And that, of course, was then echoed throughout the corporatist globalist media echo chamber, right? So needless to say, there are clear reasons as to why the so-called mainstream media has lost so much credibility, and I think their levels of trust are just going to continue to implode. Who would have ever dreamt that the presidency of Donald Trump would be the occasion for the complete and total meltdown of the elite media establishment in trying to bring down a president they only succeeded in engineering their own demise?